all these rejections from the middle Bollinger Band.
Resistance we're going to need.
If you actually see here, we get a
And we'll look for a healthy higher
I
low.
would not
don't have
be
the
convinced
pullback
to
to
enter a long trade.
Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. We're going to look at Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, BCH today, and then I'm going to start switching again where we keep Bitcoin and Ethereum as the standard, and then add in Neo and some other names that members want to look at every other day. So the curtain levers were out in full force yesterday. 12 downvotes on the video, pretty devastating, but I'm going to make a compromise. Not going to get curtains, but I am going to get a green screen so I can broadcast in space, maybe with some goats. So that'll arrive in a few days, and we'll see if I can figure that out. So looking at Bitcoin to start it off, we have healthy consolidation, very low volume. It's been low volume both for the bulls and the bears. So on the weekly time frame, we see this continued decline in volume. And remember, we're looking for this volume pattern to break to indicate some momentum, some short-term direction and momentum. So I'm looking at this clear lower high pattern, although, let's see, the week just ended, so a new week's just starting. Anything above 41,000, of course, depends on what exchange you're looking at, but the general overall pattern is clearly declining volume, and we're looking for a clear spike, and it will be a very notable spike when it does happen, and that is going to lead to either a bear flag confirmation and another leg down, or a bull move up into the mid to upper 7,000 range, in my opinion. So the thumbnail of this video talks about market direction soon, and I'm talking about short-term timeframes. So the daily chart is either going to pull back more significantly and lose this daily exponential support and head back down towards the mid 6,000 and lower 6,000 range, or we're going to see a clear bull break of this resistance level, which is our multiple tops in the 6,800s, the low 6,800s. So you can see the very healthy consolidation right now. I'm still bullish on Bitcoin short term as long as these daily exponential moving averages hold. Look at the 12 period. The 12 period has held 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 candlesticks in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, and that's still catching up now. We're looking for the bull cross here of these exponential moving averages. Again, another leg down, losing this support could potentially negate that cross, but until that happens, this is very healthy consolidation, and I am just fine holding my current position, patiently waiting to see if this exponential moving average support can hold. So on the 4-hour time frame, the consolidation that's been going on has been giving us clear levels to be watching, lower highs. So I'm looking at a resistance level of 67.63, another one here at 67.49, and now we're looking at this exponential support on the 4-hour. Every single dip below it, the bulls are buying this dip and holding it. Here we are testing it again, but this is again showing the bulls not giving up. They're not rolling over and letting the bears just take over. The bulls are here trying to defend the support level and buy the dip. There are a couple bearish articles coming out, some economists going bearish on Bitcoin because of over-regulation. In my opinion, the market bulls are waiting for regulation in order to show up and have a more clear sense of what's going to be occurring and have some more guidelines and have some more security on these longer term positions. So I am looking for regulation to be a bullish thing for this sector, but their spin on it was that it would be bearish. I disagree in that regard. We have no idea when this, framework is going to come. It could be in a year. It could be in 18 months. It could be in 2 months. But we're looking for ETFs, we're looking for institutional money to come in, and with those things, we have to have regulation first and some more clear answers on how the government and how the SEC and how these organizations are going to be dealing with things. So what I'm looking at right now is the short-term support of 6,660, the low of the 4-hour consolidation right now. Again, if that level breaks, it's not game over for the bulls because the daily exponential moving average support is still catching up, and that's down in the 6550 to 6600 range, and it would have to be a high bear volume break on the 4-hour time frame and a move down to really below 6600 for me to be switch over the short-term sentiment to bearish. And you can see even just putting a trend line, I don't usually use trend lines much, but you can see a clear support level where the bulls are holding multiple times, and we're still holding this strong uptrend on this 4-hour time frame. So I don't see any short-term red flags at this point. I am noting that the bulls have not really had much follow-through over the last 24 plus hours, but neither have the bears. So again, it's a bit of an indecision standing, and we're waiting for some more clarity in the short term to occur. Likely in the next 24 hours, we're going to get some more clarity. Again, I want to point out that the early morning bull moves where we see this consistent East Coast mornings. This one today was at 7:25 and 7:30. We've seen them in the past now at 8:05 and 8:15. We've seen them at 9:15. So between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. Eastern, over this bull move on the daily time frame, which has lasted 2 weeks at this point, we've seen probably, just off the top of my head, I'd say maybe 7 or 8 times that we've seen this morning bull spike. But also note that it doesn't get a ton of follow through, where we do have these big upper wicks, and the bears have been jumping in the past couple times that it has occurred. But it is worth noting to be watching for that potential. If you're day trading and you're waiting for that little morning flip, you sell on the spike and reload for cheaper, it is a possibility to play that morning action. But otherwise, I personally am using the longer term time frames with a longer term vision, or I should say a longer term game plan of things, where I am staying in my position, my partial Bitcoin position, and I will exit if we lose daily exponential moving average support. And if we do, then we'll have to pull back and form a clear higher low, and then it will be another attempt at that double top at 68.30 or so, in my opinion. So that's where our leader Bitcoin stands. Very healthy daily consolidation, no red flags. Ethereum, pretty similar daily consolidation. Anything above 451, the double bottom, will continue to keep the bulls in control. A little bit of a different standing on where we are with the exponential moving averages. So they're not support, and they're not as close to a bull cross. So that's worth noting. Weekly volume on Ethereum dropping off consistently as well. So we're going to be keeping an eye out for a spike in weekly volume to give us some clarity in the short term. And again, the daily time frame, no red flags unless we see increasing bear volume and head down to 451. The 4-hour time frame has consolidated more significantly than Bitcoin has. So it's one of those things where we ran up stronger. Ethereum took the lead for the bulls on this move up to the mid 490s and then have pulled back more significantly than we were. And if we compare that ETH BTC chart, we see the clear bull spike and then we see the clear pullback. So ETH bulls pulled out ahead very clearly, and then they gave it back, and now we're trying to reach back an equilibrium, so to speak, in terms of who's stronger, Ethereum or Bitcoin. This now puts them much closer to each other hand in hand, rather than Ethereum being the clear lead bull as it was when we were up in the 490s. So Ethereum, 4-hour time frame, bulls are looking for a higher low compared to 462. We have a lot of space to work with where that could occur. How are we confident when our 4-hour higher low has been established? The hourly trend needs to change. So we have not seen an hourly higher low and higher high since this consolidation has begun. And once we do, that will be the potential confidence of the 4-hour higher low being set. So let's say right now, if we get a bull pullback here, we hold the low of 472.25 and we see a bull break and get over 477.38 and we see some bullish action in Bitcoin, it's a potential bullish entry opportunity just because the stop loss level would be the low of consolidation and there's not a ton of risk on that kind of trade. So I'm a lot more likely to get into trades, even if the odds aren't great or if there's not a ton going on. If I have a stop loss level close by and I know my risk is really small, I'm a lot more likely to be taking chances on trades. Whereas, just if we look at this 4-hour time frame, we don't see where there's any support level nearby or any bottom. So we have to wait for the bulls to shift momentum before we're confident in making that entry and have that support level to be playing off of. Otherwise, we could just drop right down and see another lower high, lower low, continuing this consolidation in that same pattern. So Litecoin is also way weaker. You can see the daily chart didn't get anywhere near breaking to a higher high. And here we are coming to the low of consolidation at this point. 74, make that 79.42. And again, we're coming to the lowest price that we've seen now in 2, 4, 6, 7 days. If Bitcoin was going to be seeing the lowest price that we've seen in the last 7 days, we would be a lot lower right now. 2, 4, 6, 7, we'd be down in the 6,400s right now if that were the case. So obviously it's not. It's very easy to see at this point that Bitcoin and Ethereum are stronger. We've been noting that for the last 3 days or so, and we're coming down to a key support test. So the 4-hour time frame, lower highs and lower lows following through. Very little support to be going off of, and it looks like the Litecoin bulls are going to need the Bitcoin bulls to save the day, and that correlation to pick up again if the Bitcoin bulls can show up. So anything under 85.72 is a daily lower high, keeping the bears in control. That's the first resistance level that the bulls have to break. But personally, I have no interest in trading Litecoin at this point. Only reason I traded Litecoin recently was, again, because it was so oversold compared to Bitcoin. And we saw Ethereum do the same thing as well. So in the past 6 weeks, we've obviously not seen a lot of bullish action. But when the bulls do show up, and it's actually the last 2+ months, But when the bulls do show up, the names that have been more extreme have seen bigger bounces. So again, just comparing ETH, BTC, we look at the daily chart. Remember back in April when we were down with the daily RSI in the teens and we saw a huge bounce and a leader on that entire bounce for Ethereum because we were so extremely oversold? And then Litecoin more recently, when I was playing it on the bounce, again, it was much more, a way less significant bounce, just only lasted 2 days. But that 2-day bounce was more significant than Bitcoin was. So overall, Litecoin is very weak. There's no doubt about that. This weekly time frame has no support nearby, and we could continue fading for a while. The daily RSI getting back to oversold at this point. Get that daily RSI under 20, then I'll be interested in Litecoin bounces again, comparative to Bitcoin bounces. BCH. So here's a good example of what I was talking about, where I'm talking about the magnitude of the consolidation that you see determines whether an equilibrium is more likely or whether continuation is more likely. So the consolidation that Ethereum and Bitcoin are seeing on their daily time frame still favor the potential for continuation. If they pull back more significantly, like BCH already has, then the bulls on the bounce attempt are likely to set the lower high. So it looks like BCH lower high has been set. That's right now at 778.80, and our support is down at 696.50. So a clear range over the last 3 days. We're pulling back, and the bulls are going to look for a higher low compared to 696.50. But again, it's a perfect example where Bitcoin needs just a little bit of bull action percentage-wise for continuation on its move, whereas the amount of percentage move BCH would need would be much more significant. So the more you pull back, the greater the odds of an equilibrium best case for the bulls, as opposed to a brief pullback and continuation being the best case for the bulls. That's where we stand overall on everything in the crypto space for these major names. One last check here on Bitcoin. Trying to hold, we have an equilibrium to be watching actually, where we have our hourly low, the high of the bounce, higher low, which was essentially a double bottom by less than $1. And then we had a lower high on this bounce just now. So we do have a nice tight equilibrium on the hourly to be watching. I should say tightening. We'll look for a higher low compared to 6,669. And then we'll look for a break of this pattern into the early hours of the morning here on the East Coast to give a short-term direction. With a bull break, we're looking back up to the mid 6,700s. And with a bear break, we're looking down to 6660, and 6,000 psychological would be the next level after that. So let's get back into Adventure Time. Moved to the farm, or started building the farm in Asheville, North Carolina the last time around. Again, the community was incredible. I'll talk more about community and gatherings and things like that we had later, but let's stick on the theme of farming. And actually, I guess we'll go community. So when I first got to Asheville, I was astounded by the welcoming that everybody gave me. So I instantly had 50 friends, just got plugged in right away. I knew one person when I went to Asheville, and within 2 weeks I had 50 good friends. And it's just everybody on the same page in terms of, if you want to hang out and be our friend, absolutely, that's great. And just such a vast array of all different ages and, people from different backgrounds and experiences. And one thing that I got into early on before the chart guys, when I had a lot of time on my hands, aside from farming, was there's a woman who I met through a friend of a friend who was going through cancer, and this was her, 8th surgery or something like that. It just kept coming back, and she was risking losing her house due to all the bills. So we started a fundraiser for her where we would do, drum circles, and we'd have bands come out and play. And I would go around town and ask all these local businesses, like, hey, can you donate, a gift card? We're doing a silent raffle. And the amount of companies that would just give things to help the community was really inspiring. And so we had all these events and raised, money to allow her to stay in her spot for as long as she could. And she has now beaten cancer and is living it up, traveling around the world and having a great time. So again, that was just my initial introduction to the community aspect of things. And I've never experienced anything like it. And that's why I stayed in Asheville. So when I was in Asheville for 2 months, I was planning on road tripping out to the Northeast, and I stayed, number one, because of my living situation and the farm. It was incredible. And number two, it was just, once I'm done road tripping, this is exactly what I'm going to be looking for in terms of community. And I had already found it. So why am I going to go road trip? I'm going to stick around and enjoy this for a while. And again, it was, we were able to barter with people. We were trading our eggs for bread and trading all different kinds of things. That's another thing I love about Asheville is everybody's down to share their skills and, you know, knowledge for just other skills and knowledge and goods and things like that. Everybody that we were hanging out with was growing their own food and making these incredible homemade dishes when we would have potlucks and things like that. You know, things that you've never even eaten before, but incredible. The amount of knowledge people have on wild foraging food and just going out and getting mushrooms or, you know, chickweed early in the spring, things like that. I had never been to a place where you can just, you know, go into a field and sit down and just start eating with a bunch of your friends and looking at all the different things that you can eat. So from there, we started to continue the farm. And here's an example of our wild free-range egg compared to a store-bought organic egg. And you can see very clearly that's a good-looking egg. And so we would feed them, you know, insects from the garden. And we would also get, like I said, the scraps from the juice bar and things like that. So the birds were definitely eating very well, and they had a free range to go wherever they want. We did have issues with hawks, so I was on hawk watch very often, and it would come in and get a bird every now and again. And oftentimes the roosters would see the hawk before I would, and I got very familiar with what different calls mean for roosters. And let's see if I can do it. That sounds like when a rooster sees a hawk, it's like they're gasping. It's this. And I instantly look up in the sky and scare off the hawk. But they're very, very smart, intelligent animals, and obviously know how to take care of themselves in the wild. We would just give them a home. They would give us some eggs. We'd give them some food. Everybody wins. So there's the goats. That's Lyra. The first 3 goats that we got were 2 sisters and the brother. The brother left. He was just there to ease the transition. And then we got Lyra, who was the alpha goat, biggest. So she was default alpha. And we had constant psychological battles where I had to tell her, no, I'm the alpha. You have to listen to me. And there was a ton of frustration with that. That took probably a year before we had our relationship down, where she would, you know, trust me and listen to me. And she would always test me every day still. We would play, and she would, you know, she's a big girl. She would weigh maybe 160, 180 pounds or something like that. Needed 2 people to pick her up, but the game would be she would, you know, walk up to me and she'd put her horns on my leg, and then she'd just start pushing a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And so I would have to push back, and every single time I would have to win. So there were plenty of times where I use it as a workout, where I would get down, you know, on my knees, and she's pushing as hard as she can. And it was definitely playful. She wasn't trying to hurt me, but I would put my hands on her horns and I would be pushing as hard as I could, and had a lot of fun with them playing that way, running around the yard. And again, I'll post some videos towards the end of this week once I run out of stories of all these animals and interacting with them. There's Boomer. You remember Boomer from the last video? He grew up real quick. The speed that pigs mature and grow is insanity. And they can impregnate and give birth at something like, we had a pig that was 4 months old get another pig pregnant. So 4 months old, 5 months old, these pigs are giving birth. And before they're 1 year old, they can have 2 litters. So Boomer here is probably definitely under 1 year old, and he got big real quick. And here are the babies that came out of nowhere. I had no idea how to recognize a pregnant pig. And one day it was just, hey, we have a bunch of baby pigs now. And then I felt bad about calling Yeti fat all the time because she had a bunch of babies in there. But they were nice little babies. That's Dr. Ham. We didn't eat Dr. Ham, but we named Dr. Ham because we didn't eat any of the animals. But Dr. Ham was Dr. Ham because one of the girls living with us had a doctor called Dr. Ham, and his beard was that color, so it seemed very fitting. But then we had Booma June and a bunch of other little piggies here. It was 1 male and 4 females, and they grew up, again, extremely fast. We had no idea what to do with them because we weren't prepared, so it was, hey, we have baby pigs now. So we took Mom and the pigs inside the house on the 2nd floor into the bathroom and gave them, you know, we had this big open shower. So we gave them with a bunch of blankets the bathroom so we could keep an eye on them for the first few days. Then we moved them out to a tent, and I ended up sleeping out there with them for the first few weeks. And just to get woken up in the middle of the night by, you know, the grunting mom and a bunch of baby pigs feeding was pretty much my heaven. So I had a great time with that. Then I started to overlap the chart guys with the farm. And here's Spring riding the moving average hose. And definitely was a balance shift because, again, like I said, I was putting in 6 to 8 hours a day with farming, and I could have cared less about stocks or anything going on in that world. And then decided, all right, let's, action's picking up again. We got Canadian MJ. Let's see what's up with stocks. So I started to shift back some focus into that and reached a balance where I was doing less hours outside, more hours on the computer, but still allowing myself, the freedom to not go insane by staring at a screen all day. So there's Lyra. And Lyra, she was the only goat that we milked. She had already had a baby when we had gotten her, and she was still milking from that baby. So it was my job to milk her every day. Some days, this was 1 day worth of milk. So she would give us a full, this is a big mason jar, and this is, your standard side mason jar. We had milk on tap for over a year and a half, and she kept milking, and we had to just stop eventually. Usually goats will just wean themselves off and they'll stop giving milk. But it got to the point where she kept going, and it was like, all right, we don't want to, deteriorate her bones and calcium or anything like that. It puts a lot of stress on the body to keep producing all these calories in milk. But when it was going, it was so good. There were times where I would just have a meal of milk, where I would just take a jar of milk. And we had so much, we were making, eggnog and all these things, trading with it, because we literally had more than we could use. And that was with a house full of, 5+ people probably at that time. And she would do this twice a day. She would give us a quart twice a day for a very long time. So she did her duty. Here's some crops that can grow in the winter. So that was new to me. I had experience in Maine. So I was used to kale being able to just barely make it through the winter in Maine. But here in North Carolina, we had, mustard greens and cabbage and kale and collards, chard. So this is mid-November, and you can see everything is thriving. So really cool to have multiple seasons and know that, the food doesn't ever stop coming if you do it right. There's Lyra looking sexy, and she knows it. That's pokeberry. I made her all pretty and pink. Look at that look. She knows it. So we would just let the grass overgrow, and the goats would eat it, and we'd eventually have to mow it, and it would be a huge task. But it's nice to not have to worry about the length of your grass. Here's an example of, a lot of people say, I don't have time to farm or grow food or anything like that. And I don't buy it. I know people are very busy, but this was when I was doing the Chart Guys full time at this point. So I was switching to now doing charts and computer work for 6 to 8 hours a day. And this was 1 day's work where I took, before this picture, it was just the yard like everything else. So I dug everything up. I took out all the grass clumps. I added composted horse manure. I added wood chips that had a bunch of mycelium growing through it, which is mushrooms. And the mycelium can help with the ability for plants to absorb nutrients. And just added leaves from the fall to cover everything. And in 1 day, I had this large space. In this space alone, you could grow enough food for a family of 3 or 4. So obviously not only that food, but a significant portion of the food that you need. And again, 1 day's worth of effort to make this already good to go. Then you just have to plant your seeds or plant your little starts, and then just make sure they're watered and tend to them and make sure the insects aren't getting to them. And it is much easier than people think. You just have to try it, and if you fail, you learn from that. So you shouldn't fear failure, because you will learn a whole lot of lessons along the way. Garlic is probably the easiest to grow. Potatoes are really easy. Tomatoes pretty easy. So there's definitely things that you can grow that will suit the amount of time that you have to give into it. And I know there's a lot of Chart Guys members who have started growing things for the first time due to this inspiration of seeing all the things that we did. So that's a goal of mine. If one person watching this video starts growing some things now that wasn't before, that's a win in my book. Kale's really easy to grow. So many of these things you can just let go on their own. Squash, give it a shot. I dare ya. There's our squash beds and corn. So you can see the squash just completely overtook everything. And we had more winter squash and summer squash than we knew what to do with. Delicata, if you haven't had delicata, it is divine. Cut it in half, put coconut oil on it, put it in the oven, and it tastes like heaven. So in the same spot that we had all these squash, the next season we till it out and we grow something different. You don't want to grow the same family in the same spot. So if you have nightshades, which are tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, you don't want to put nightshades in the same spot back to back, because it can help, whether it's parasites or things. Certain plants use different amounts of nutrients in the soil. So let's say you have something that uses a lot of nitrogen and you continually put it in the same spot, you're going to deplete that soil of nitrogen. So brassicas would be kale, cabbage, collards, all those things, and we would rotate. So we ended up doing garlic in that same spot. So 1 year later, tons of garlic. We had more than we knew what to do with. Ended up just growing a bunch and hanging it up in the garage out to dry. And that was another thing that we could just trade with everybody, a bunch of heads of garlic for whatever. And the cycle of life, just continually growing new things. That's Nerdbird. If you've seen the goat video, Nerdbird stars in it, but Nerdbird's wet here. This is a silky chicken, much smaller, definitely not bred for survival. If you have any predators, they'll be the first to go. They're small and clumsy, but they're good friends. So I'll give some videos of Nerdbird in the future. And that's that. So I highly encourage everybody to try growing some food, learn about it, read online. You have everything you need to know at your fingertips. I can't tell you how many times I was in the field and about to plant something and being like, what's the spacing I'm supposed to put in between these things again, and not remembering off the top of my head, and I just whip out my phone and look on Google, and 30 seconds later I know exactly how to plant these crops. So the information is there. The time may not be there, but you can certainly make a little bit of time. And if you have children, my dad, I didn't have much experience growing with stuff, but I definitely grew some cherry tomatoes with the help of my dad, and there's no doubt in my mind that stuck with me for 15 years until I, dug that knowledge and that experience and that enjoyment back up 15 years later. So show your kids some things and teach them that food doesn't grow on grocery store shelves. I hope you all continue to do good things. I think by tomorrow we're going to have some more information on Bitcoin in terms of short-term direction. Let's see if this is the hourly high or low in our tightening range. Break of 67.13 would be a good sign here in the short term. We'll check back in tomorrow. Have a great rest of your night. We'll see you soon.